Well, hello, and welcome to the show. I'm Nadia Giordana, and you are watching Where Women Talk. My guest today is award-winning author Jenney Egertson. She is known for relating stories that illuminate change, connection, and the human experience. So let's not say here, let's go talk to Jenney. Welcome to the show, Jenney.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here.
I want to kick things off by getting started with having you give us a little mini rundown on your early writing career and that first book that you wrote about 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay. Well, my love of writing started probably shortly after I learned how to read. I decided when I was 7 years old that I was going to write. So, it started pretty early. And then my careers all have included writing. So I was a high school English teacher, taught writing. Then I was in corporate communications for years, probably off and on for, 40, 45 years going in and out of corporate work. I was usually directing the internal communications area. And then when I wasn't in a corporate job, I was consulting, doing writing and communication strategy, writing speeches. So it's always been a part of my life. It's what I love to do. And my first book, the first book I started writing in about 2000 after I left one of my corporate jobs. And I had met a woman that I thought was fabulous. She had great advice. And so I decided to write a book of stories about women over the age of 80. And so that was my first book, published in 2018.
Okay, yes, and I remember that book and I enjoyed it very much. Well, what sparked? I don't remember you talking about a second book in the works at that time, but you may have had that in the back of your mind, but I don't remember it. What sparked this second book, and how did you come to know George Evans?
Well, I never intended to write a second book about another person. I don't read even a lot of nonfiction, but one of the women I wrote about in my first book, her name was Hallie, and she grew up in Selma. She was from Selma, Alabama. And so my partner Kevin and I wanted to see the house that she had told me so much about. So in 2020, we drove to Selma and we saw her house. And we decided to stay overnight. And the next day, we took a tour of Selma. And on that tour, the person who gives the tour always, at the time, asked George Evans, who was a former mayor of Selma, to stop by and talk to people on the tour. So when he stopped by, something just clicked. As you know, that happens with people. Kevin and I both just really enjoyed his company. He was telling us about Selma and the history of the building we were standing in front of. And I handed him a copy of my book because I said, Hallie grew up here, so you might want to read about her. He said, oh, yeah, I've been looking for someone to help me with my book, too. And right then I thought, no way. Absolutely no way am I doing this again. But I also had a feeling that it might end up that I would. And as I thought about it and as I thought about George Evans, um, I decided to go ahead and do it. And when I called him, I just said, there's only one thing. You've got to let me write it from my point of view. And you have to let me include what I learn as a white woman of privilege, because I'm writing about a Black man who grew up during the civil rights era. And he said, okay, he was fine with that. So that's how it got started.
So, and was it an autobiography? Well, not an autobiography. A memoirs was what his basic goal was with getting that book written. Is that correct?
Yes, I think his goal was he wanted to tell his story because he wanted to set himself as an example for others, adults, but young people. Especially, he had served as superintendent, the first black superintendent of the Dallas County School District in Selma, and he wanted to set himself as a role model, as a person who never aspired to be a leader but who said yes to every opportunity that came his way. And he just kept saying yes and wound up being the first. Well, he wound up working his way up through the school system as a teacher, and then as a principal, and as administrator, and then as the first black superintendent. After that, he became the first black president of Selma City Council, and then people loved his leadership. He became the second black mayor of Selma. So, and he wanted people to see that trajectory, how without aspiring to it, he wanted to serve. And that's what he did.
And what's the bottom line for you? What's your goal to get out of this book to bring forth from it?
Well, it started out very differently. My goal was just to help somebody that I admired. You know, I thought I'd get it done in a year, hand it over to him, and that would be it. But as I got to know him, and we were going through some pretty rough times as a world and as a country, we started during COVID. George Floyd was murdered a few months after we started working together. Um, I decided that he was a really important role model for more than just the students in Selma or people in Selma. His leadership was unusual. He had such integrity. He was such an ethical leader. He was so compassionate without being a pushover. I just felt that his story needed to be told, and at least in a region, in his region, but maybe beyond that. Um, that this type of leadership is what's needed.
And you mentioned you used the word beloved and how the public has responded to him. Can you illuminate that further?
Yes. You know, we worked on, I'm going to tell a story about this. We worked on the book for 3 years and he had seen the content and approved it. And then suddenly he died.
Mhm.
And that was such a shock to me. But I had been in contact with his family. I had met his wife. I had interviewed 15 different people, black and white, um, from Selma to write the book. And so I went to Selma for his funeral. And the outpouring of love that I saw there and heard there, this was a 3 hour memorial service with gospel singers and a church choir and 20 speakers. And in across the town, there were posters of George Evans. He was beloved. And I knew that because of what people had told me that I had interviewed. But when I went to his memorial service, I saw it. I felt it. It was just amazing. And he deserved it. He deserved it because he was such an unusual leader in so many ways.
You know, and I think that is a rare quality in today's modern age. What would you say is the single most valuable takeaway readers will get from this book?
Well, um, just that leaders who are there for everybody, across race, across age, you know, ethnicity, abilities, gender, economic status. That's the kind of leader we need, and that's the kind of leader he was. He was exceptional at leading a cross race. And it was not easy for him. Um, he was criticized by the white community and at certain times, and then by the black community at certain times. And he rose above that. He never got down and dirty. He rose above it. And so that's a long answer, but my takeaway is that that kind of leadership that starts with a love of the community and compassion, and a leader that maintains integrity despite what else is going around. Um, that's who George Evans was, and that's why he was so beloved, and that's the kind of leader we need.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, we do need more leaders like that. Well, how was working on this project, meeting and knowing George Evans, his family, the entire experience, how did that impact you and your life?
Well, I spent a lot of my time on it, and so it kind of became a job, a big part of my job. But I gained a family. The biggest impact was his family is my family. I'm part of theirs. I became part of Selma. I understood um, the history of the South a lot better. I think I understood more about what it was like to grow up as a black person during Jim Crow. I
Mhm.
just, I mean, that's a lot. I guess I learned a lot, and the way it changed me was I just have expanded views and an expanded family. Um, and I love Selma. I love to go back there. I have friends there. I visit a lot whenever I can, and I write about it.
I will put your contact information on the screen, and of course, I'll put up some covers for your books and whatever is necessary information. But do you have any parting words? And I might add a second question to this, parting words that you might have forgotten or I didn't ask. But also, do you have another book in the works yet, or thoughts along those lines?
You know, I'll answer that first because when I was 7 years old, that's when I decided to write, and I decided to write a children's book about animals. And I haven't done that yet. So that will probably be my next book. My daughter will probably illustrate it. We'll collaborate on that, and it might take me a long time, but I'm going to fulfill a lifelong dream.
Enjoy the process.
Thank you. And what I would like to say is I think that this book, people will relate to it. At first, we thought, oh, it's just a regional book. But I
Mhm.
think people will appreciate, again, George Evans' style of leadership and be reminded about that. He just had, he was so, oh, the other thing I guess I didn't mention was that while he was while he was going, rising up in Selma and fulfilling all these roles, he was also a sports official,
Oh,
and so he rose through those ranks as well. Started out officiating at the high school level, went to junior college, and wound up officiating for major college games, and was awarded. He's in a couple of halls of fame now. So he was just an amazingly kind, soft-spoken, tough, and very busy leader who loved his family and just was a great role model. So I think that's what I want people to know, and that's the reason to read it, to get to know a great role model.
I think my keyword takeaway from talking with you is leadership And that's of interest to people across all walks and all parts of the country. Jenney, thank you for being on the show today. This was terrific.
Well, thank you, Nadia. It was my great pleasure. I really appreciate the opportunity.